Join us on an investigative journey.
We'll educate each other on a range of scientific discoveries, concepts, and phenomena,
as well as a dive into the complex world of pseudoscience to separate the factual from the fabricated.
I'm Matt McCabe.
I'm Levi Bateman.
And I'm Sam Lawsarica.
And this is Idio Facto.
Exciting news this week, though. We're all lockdown bros together.
Yeah, how quickly did our last episode age?
Yeah.
We recorded it on the Sunday night, and then I think on the Monday, South Australia announced cases, and you guys ended up in lockdown as well.
As of 6 p.m. on Tuesday.
If I believed in karma, I would have said that it was your karma for making fun of me for being in lockdown. But
hey,
I don't think that a global pandemic was caused by a conversation that we had on the Sunday.
Hey,
No.
we weren't making fun of you. Hey, we felt quite sorry for you and all the others,
okay.
the other
yeah.
responsible people that are in lockdown.
Right.
Plus, we're quick lockdown, in and out, done. Hopefully. Assuming
Hopefully.
everything goes as it has been going.
We should be careful about saying things like that because watch on Tuesday, the day before we release this podcast.
Yeah. So, for context, it is Sunday the 25th of July, and we're not going to make any more predictions.
Unlike the TikTok guy, did you hear about that?
Mm-mm.
Yeah, he was pretending that he was using maths to predict the number of cases in New South Wales.
Well, he got it right something like 5 days in a row, and they were quite obscure numbers. He was using some sort of formula, but the funny part was that he actually uploaded a video and made a speech of himself at the anti-lockdown protest in Sydney.
Excellent.
And the police had to come and see him. So,
Well, actually, I wanted to talk to you guys about the anti-lockdown protests in Sydney this week.
okay.
Because it really, really pisses me right off.
Yeah,
Fair.
You're not alone.
How can you be so stupid? Like, I fully respect people's right to protest. I fully respect people's right to their freedoms. But that is probably the most irresponsible way to go about a protest about freedoms at this point in time.
Yeah.
I don't care how you feel about the government's treatment of lockdowns and stay-at-home orders, whatever you want to call them, or the pandemic at large, but like completely disregarding all of the scientific advice and having a mass protest in the middle of one of the biggest cities in Australia that is currently experiencing the biggest outbreak of the COVID-19 disease that we've had in Australia so far, and marching through a suburb that was literally less than 24 hours earlier listed as a hotspot is just, I just can't fathom the stupidity of that.
It's highly likely that a lot of those people that were at the protest that weren't wearing masks have COVID and probably aren't being tested. And so
Yeah, that's my fear, is people are saying, oh, that'll probably be a super spreader event. We may never know, because the people who are there clearly don't believe in the seriousness of the virus and therefore clearly don't believe in getting tested for the virus. So we may never know how many people there had it or got it from being there.
I'm not sure what the law is on close contacts, whether or not you believe in it. If you are a close contact, are you required to go and get a COVID test?
I don't know if you're legally required. It's your civic responsibility. If nothing else, it's your civic responsibility. But
Absolutely. I'm just wondering whether or not these people, if there was a case at the protest and all 2,000 or how many of these people there were at the protest, whether or not they would actually be legally required to go and get a COVID test.
I don't think there's a legal requirement.
Okay.
Well, even if there was, I don't think they would pay any attention. This whole protest was ostensibly about their right to say no to those sorts of things.
Hang on. We should probably just fact check that it's a legal requirement, because it actually might be. It's a public health directive.
The stay-at-home order is a public health directive as well, and they've disregarded that. The New South Wales Police have formed a task force to try and find the 3,500 people who actually went to this protest and give them infringement notices because they've broken the law by doing this. And okay, I understand the compulsion to maintain your freedom, but this is not a political thing. I mean, it's been made a political thing, but the medical evidence, the epidemiologists, the scientists, everyone says this is the best way of keeping a global pandemic under control, and it's worked for us up until this point. Why would you disregard everybody? Literally everybody with any authority or knowledge has said, do this, stay at home, please, unless you absolutely have to go somewhere, and you just disregard it. And it just blows my mind.
That's actually a really good point. It does become an anti-government protest, but like you've said, it's not really a government
health initiative.
No, it's not an initiative by the government. Obviously it falls upon the government to enforce it because they are the ones with the power. But it's not. They haven't sort of made up these rules. They're not the ones primarily doing the research. The politicians and the people that are enforcing it aren't the ones that are. They're getting advice from others who are very well informed.
Yeah.
Yes.
So I'm pretty sure it is a legal requirement
to get tested.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
So penalties for breaching public health orders. Individuals or corporations can be convicted and charged for non-compliance with New South Wales public health orders, can be imprisoned for up to 6 months, or receive a penalty of up to $11,000 with a further $5,500 fine each day the offence continues. That's just with a quick search, so not 100% sure, but pretty sure.
Anyway, I don't have a topic this week. I just really needed to get this off my chest because it's been really bothering me for the last couple of days.
Look, it's just, I honestly, I think it really boils down to people being selfish. There was an excellent little explanation about it. Someone posted on Instagram that really, there's a lot of people doing it that essentially are doing it for the attention.
Mm.
Yeah, they feel disenfranchised and they feel like nobody sees them and they're having to hide behind masks. And I get that. I absolutely understand that. I don't want to be in lockdown. I really would not like I like freedom and I like democracy. Like it's not like I disagree with all of these things and I love being locked down. I just don't think that disregarding public health advice is the way to deal.
You know who else hates state lockdowns? Is the government.
Yeah, it's a massive lose-lose for the government as well.
This is not a political podcast, so I'm reluctant to get into it too much. But really, nothing's worse for the government than a big lockdown. The government would love nothing more than for people to be able to travel where they want, to go out and spend their money and
make
to keep
lots of money, pay lots of tax.
Exactly. Keep the economy rolling on. But
instead, it's the opposite. They're handing out money to people who can't pay them tax.
That's right. I don't believe there's some
and
conspiracy.
Arguably not as much as they should, but that is irrelevant to this discussion.
Yeah.
But these are the arguments that people who believe this sort of stuff and who go to these sorts of protests, they're the arguments that people come up with. It's like, well, the government's not giving us enough money to live. And yeah, I totally get that. But the way you deal with that is not to completely disregard all of the health advice and
extend the lockdown by doing something that irresponsible.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And then you give those people that you're railing against, the whole thing you're protesting against, you've now given them reason to blame you for the extension of the lockdown.
Yeah. One of the most common arguments I've seen put out is, it's only a 1% death rate. Let's just let it run its course. Okay, so what that argument boils down to is you don't really care if 250,000 people, which is roughly 1% of the population of Australia, you don't really care if 250,000 other people die as long as you get to live your life how you want to. And that's just extreme selfishness and not thinking about anyone else or the consequences of your actions. That's presuming that you're not one of the people that becomes very unwell and dies from it.
I was going to say, today, tragically, there was someone in their 30s that died from COVID-19.
Mid-30s female, no previous medical conditions.
So it is very clearly not a disease that only affects people with comorbidities or the elderly.
Yeah, and the New South Wales Health Minister broke down the ICU patients by age bracket, and there was a couple in the teens, a few in the 20s, a few in the 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s. So it was very even spread. There was actually a compared to earlier when there was some in the 80s and 70s and then a couple in the lower age groups, that's actually skewed down now where a few more are in like less under 50. So
from my understanding, it's also not, it's one of those diseases that, of course, the mortality rate might not be astronomically high, but if you get the disease and if you get the virus and you don't die, you're still affected for months of your life. And there are people that have had it and months down the track, they're still their respiratory system's still not back to normal.
Respiratory scarring, neurological issues, all the other complications of... See, this is talking about just the COVID infection. This is not including complications of being in ICU, which there are many. The risk of clotting with one of the vaccines there is a very low risk there, but it's a real risk. The risk of clotting from being in ICU is much higher.
Yeah.
If we let it run its course, the main reason that we're doing lockdowns, which you could say until you're blue in the face and people that protest still don't listen, is that we don't want the hospitals to become overrun. If we let it run its course and everyone got infected at the same time, the hospitals would very quickly become overrun, and that death rate goes from 1% way up. And that's what you saw in Indonesia right now. They're getting 1,000 deaths per day.
Oh.
In Italy last year, Spain last year, the US,
there are case studies of this happening all around the world, and what
Brazil.
It eventually becomes is the hospitals needing to decide who gets this ventilator. Is it this 40-year-old patient that
who
just
gets
come
half
in?
of this ventilator? They're doing shared ventilators, and they still don't have enough.
Really?
Yep.
Yeah.
So, I mean, we could talk about this all day, and I'm conscious that people have probably heard this sort of argument thousands and thousands of times on various channels. But the one thing I wanted to talk about was the fact that Otagi, or the Australian Technical Advisory Group on Immunisation in Australia, recently changed their advice regarding the AstraZeneca vaccine to recommend that people under the age of 40 should receive the AstraZeneca vaccine if it's available to them. That contradicts their previous advice, which recommended that they didn't take that and they prefer Pfizer if that was available, because of that risk, that very small risk of blood clot that you were talking about earlier, Sam. I've heard a lot of commentary. They changed that advice based on pressure from the federal government. The reason they changed that advice is because the situation in Sydney at the moment is getting a lot more drastic with this Delta variant than it ever has been before. And so the risk of getting COVID and having severe complications regarding that is a lot higher now than the risk of having the blood clot due to the vaccine. That's why they've changed their advice. It had nothing to do with pressure from any governments anywhere. It's because the science says you're much better off getting any vaccine you can get your hands on right now than just not getting a vaccine and potentially getting COVID.
Yeah,
it's as simple as that. It's based on science. It's not based on political pressure.
It's a risk mitigation decision.
Yeah, and people say that the risk outweighs the benefit, like the risk of getting the blood clotting disease outweighs the risk of dying from COVID. Just ran some very quick numbers. A lot of people have been saying these kind of decisions, which is why they need to be spoken with a GP, is that it's not just a yes or no, it's a risk versus benefit decision that needs to be made. You need to look at risks on both sides, the risk of getting vaccinated versus the risk of not getting vaccinated, the alternatives, so waiting for Pfizer availability, etc. The risk of getting COVID and dying in New South Wales at the moment, all the cases from the current Delta outbreak, there have been 8 deaths to date. That gives us a risk of 0.34% of dying from COVID. That's including there's still 30-something cases in ICU and 17 on ventilators, so there's potentially more deaths from those numbers. But this is being as generous as possible. That gives you a risk of 0.3% of dying, which is 3 in 1,000. The risk of getting TTS and dying from blood clots is 1 in a million. 6 cases in about 6.5 million doses and counting. So that's being conservatively generous against the vaccine in both cases. And as you can see, those risks they're not even close. Don't get me wrong, a risk of 1 in a million is still a legitimate risk that needs to be discussed. And if the risk of catching COVID and becoming unwell from it was very low at the moment, sure, by all means, wait for Pfizer.
And this is exactly why Otagi has said, don't take AstraZeneca, is because when there's no cases in Australia, it's very easy to say, well, the risk of taking that vaccine far outweighs the risk of getting COVID, because you're just not going to get COVID if there's no cases in Australia, right?
Yeah.
But when there's cases...
When there's uncontrolled community transmission, that
Exactly.
risk-benefit ratio drastically changes.
Yeah, and it's not like that risk is going down either, because the last week we've basically had the same number of people infectious and active in the community.
Yeah. The daily new cases have been between 100 and 150 every day pretty much for the last week.
Yeah,
so.
and the number of people active and infectious in the community has been between 30 and 50 for the last week.
And that ICU and ventilated cases are rising daily. Slowly, but are rising. Not going down.
So I don't want to say anything else about COVID anymore, but that just really grinds my gears, and I just, please get vaccinated. Take whatever vaccine you can get based on the advice from Otagi right now. Go and get whatever vaccine, no matter what age you are. Go to your GP. Ask for their advice if you need to. Get the vaccine. That's really the only way that we're ever going to stop these lockdowns. To those people who did protest, don't do that. Go and get vaccinated. It's really not that difficult. Sorry, I'm glad I got that off my chest.
If you guys don't mind, I might change the subject to something a little bit more lighthearted.
Sure.
How about we do that? Thank you.
All right. I've got a number sequence that I'm going to give you, and you have to try and work out what rule this number sequence is following. Now, you don't have to follow on with my number sequence, but you have to work out what the rule is behind the sequence.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, I'm just going to write this down.
And then give me a sequence back to me that you think follows the same rule that I'm following.
Oh, look. The brachial plexus. Sorry, just on my notes.
Thank you.
Anyway. I didn't know what was on my notebook. Anyway. Let's
hey,
continue.
look. A AA battery.
Hey, look. Jinro grapefruit wine.
Oh, wow.
Ooh.
Are we just picking up things on our desks and saying, hey, look. Hey, look. A remote control for my audio receiver. Yeah, for those who obviously can't see, Sam just held up a meerkat plush toy thing.
His name is Mikkel, and he's from the Minato Zoo. Thank you.
Anyway, Levi, what were you saying?
I've forgotten.
Yeah, who cares?
Okay.
Something about numbers.
Anyway, so yeah, you're going to give us a pattern of numbers, and we
Yes.
have to try and guess the pattern and give a pattern back to you.
Yes. So you can continue my pattern
Yep.
on from where I stop, or give me a new one that fits the same rule.
Okay.
So it's quite easy. You'll probably get it. So the number pattern is 2, 4, 8.
Okay. Can I continue?
Sure.
16?
Mm-hmm.
32?
Mm-hmm.
You want to keep going?
64, 128,
64.
256, 512.
So that fits the rule. Absolutely.
Multiply by 2.
Yep.
Yeah.
So give me another rule. Give me another number sequence back to me that fits the same rule.
4, 16.
That's squared, not doubled.
My number sequence was 2, 4, 8.
Yeah, so his is doubling every time. What about 3, 6, 12, 24, 48, 96?
So that fits the rule as well.
Yeah.
So what do you think the rule is?
Double the number.
Double the previous number in the sequence.
That's not the rule.
Okay. Is the rule double plus 1 minus 1?
That's not the rule.
Oh.
I'll give you another one, another example.
Mm-hmm.
5, 10, 20.
40, 80,
Mm-hmm.
160.
That also fits the rule. So what do you think the rule is now?
Well, you're telling me it's not the previous number in the sequence doubled.
It's not. That's not the rule. See, this is good because what's happening is that you keep trying to find ways to confirm what you believe to be true rather than looking at alternatives.
I mean, I am now looking at alternatives because you've told me that it's definitely not that. It's going to be something really simple, isn't it?
It might be, but you haven't asked me anything. I know what the formula is, so you present a series of 3 numbers to me, and I'll tell you whether or not it fits my rule.
All right, 1, 2, 3.
That fits the rule.
Okay, 4, 5, 6.
That fits the rule.
Okay, 10, 120, 450.
That fits the rule.
The rule is increasing numbers.
Exactly.
Right. Okay.
3 numbers in increasing value.
Well, you know what? That is a good demonstration of Occam's razor, isn't it?
It is, but it's also a good demonstration of us, confirmation bias, you thinking that you know the rule, and so every time I tell you that the rule that you think that you've got right in your head is correct, that further confirms your suspicions. So I got the idea for this off of a Veritasium video. You guys know the YouTube channel Veritasium?
Yeah, a really good channel.
It's brilliant. Sam, you should get around it if you don't know about it, but it's excellent. It's basically Derek Miller from Veritasium, who was born in Traralgon, the town that Matt and I used to live in. He made a video basically doing to strangers on the street what I just did to you guys. And it was inspired, his video was inspired by the book The Black Swan by Nassim Taleb. Apparently the black swan is a metaphor for the unknown or the mysterious. And it's because in most of the world, swans are white. And so when Australia was colonised and the first Europeans to see a black swan realised that their belief that all swans were white must have been false. So the point of the video, and relating back to the metaphor, Derek was saying that we should always try and find that black swan. We should basically always try and disprove the things that we believe in. And what that will do is we will either find the truth or it will confirm our own beliefs about said subject.
We just proved that we're bad skeptics, I guess.
But it's so difficult. It's so easy to fall into, you know?
Yeah, definitely.
Everything that I was giving you, all of the information, was that the numbers were doubling. So you had every reason to believe that they were doubling. But you didn't try anything else. You didn't try to disprove that, you know, didn't try and find that there might have been some other rule with that number combination.
I'd like to pretend that we're much smarter than that, but obviously we're not. We're still humans.
It's a bit of a trick, but it is a good metaphor for what we should be doing, really, as skeptics, critical thinkers.
Definitely. It's a much better trick than some of the brain teasers that I see.
Yeah.
Which are just like plays on words. Yeah. And you go, oh, well, you know, you need to make yourself better understood. It's not my fault for misunderstanding what you were asking me. But this one is actually a really good, like, yeah, well, that, yep.
Yeah.
Just because I had a really curated subset of data.
I think probably a good point out of it is even when you're not necessarily wrong, there might be a more correct explanation for something.
Yeah.
So if you think you've got the right answer, that's not when you stop looking until someone throws something else in your face. Because obviously if you'd said the sequence is 2, 4, 8, and then go on and then you say the next one's 1, 2, 3, then obviously we're more likely to get that.
That's right, yeah.
As you said, we didn't ask any more questions once we thought we knew what it was.
But in life, we're very often met with incomplete data sets, and we need to extrapolate, and we need to look at sources for that data, or possibly where the statistics may be used to sort of fit an agenda, I suppose.
Yeah. Well, there are two types of people in this world. Those that can extrapolate from incomplete data.
I hate that. I love that. I love that. There are two types of people in Idiot Factor, those that love that joke and those that hate it.
Yeah, definitely a polarizing joke.
Very clever. I think maybe we should get into the main topic of the episode.
So I was just mentioning to Levi before we started recording, it's really hard to find good quality evidence on this, and you'll understand why in a minute. Something I wanted to look into, I was going to look into it as one of my mini segments, and then I started looking into it and I got really interested and wanted to look further into it. And that was the effects of social media on mental health. Because it's something I thought would have a pretty straightforward answer. You know, the things you hear are it's social media use is linked with depression and anxiety. And I thought, okay, I'll just have a look through some papers and see what I find. And if I find some data supporting that, great. And then on my first initial literature review, if we can call it that, I didn't really find the answers I was expecting to find. So kind of leads in well from your segment, Levi. First, a bit of background about social media use. Social media has become an essential part of life to the vast majority of the population, really, especially in developed countries. The daily time spent on social media has significantly increased over the last 10 years, both with, the number of platforms available, but also just obviously the ease of access to smartphones and high quality internet and phone data connections worldwide. So numbers from 2020, there are 4.26 billion social media users worldwide, which is 53.6% of the population.
Wow.
Which, when you consider all the demographics, all the socioeconomic statuses around the world and different age brackets and all those sorts of things, that's a huge amount of the population, 53.6%.
Yeah, that's unreal. I wouldn't have thought it would be that high. That's actually surprising.
I'll include some links in the show notes to where I got these stats from, but I checked over a few websites and it was pretty consistent numbers, varied very slightly, but not a significant amount. Daily time spent on social media in 2020, on average, want to have a guess? On average across the world. And this is across all users, not like it's across active users, which is active monthly users. So using at least once a month.
I'm going to say each person would probably be on social media in some form or another for probably about 2.5 hours per day, maybe about 150 minutes.
The answer is 145 minutes per day. So basically 2.5 hours per day and that's in average.
How close was that?
Yeah. So you were extremely close. And this number was consistent of multiple sources. It was varied between 140 and 145 minutes on an average. Interestingly, by continent, which continent had the highest use?
Asia.
I'm going to say North America.
South America, 204 minutes average. Second was also neither of those, Africa, average of 190 minutes.
Wow.
And
is
then
that because there are fewer users, but the users who are there are very active?
quite possibly, I didn't look into it any further than that. Asia, Oceania, 136 minutes on average. North America, 126, and Europe, 75.
So it's all pretty close except for Europe.
And this social media use is, I guess, spread between, we'll call them the big four or the big five, whatever you like, Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, Twitter. And I wonder if this includes messaging services as well, like WhatsApp, Messenger.
Yeah. So that does include WhatsApp. It does include Messenger, but that's as part of Facebook.
Oh, okay. I don't know if I call that social media.
Would you like a definition of social media?
Yeah, because then we've had social media since I was in primary school.
With texting.
Because I was texting people when I was in primary school. Is that social media?
Form of electronic communication, such as websites for social networking and microblogging, through which users create online communities to share information, ideas, personal messages, and other content.
So it's more the WhatsApp groups more than...
Rather than person-to-person messaging.
Yeah, okay.
But I would say probably at least half of the messages that I send on Facebook per day are a group of some sort.
Yeah, but how long does it take you to send a message?
Well, yeah, not very long, I guess.
But then cumulatively, that's a lot of minutes.
Yeah.
It must be around about 145 minutes.
Oh, yeah. Did you just pull that number out of the air, did you?
Well, I'll give you the highest, the most used social networks. I missed a couple in the group because I genuinely didn't know what they were, such as Quora. What is that? Anyway.
Quora, as in like...
Quora?
Oh, it's like a question and answer sort of...
Ah, yeah, that's right.
It's like someone asked a question. It's a forum, basically.
Yeah. So the first few is just the order they were in, and then there's a few others which I just didn't include in the list. I just included what's most popular here. So most popular social networks worldwide, and this is defined as active users, so active monthly users. Facebook is the most popular with 2.797 billion users. YouTube is second with 2.291 billion.
YouTube.
WhatsApp third with 2 billion. And then there was a few others below that. And then Instagram with 1.287 billion. WeChat with 1.225 billion. Then we moved down to TikTok, 732 million. Snapchat has 528 million. Reddit, 430 million. Twitter, 396 million.
A few of those, I'm surprised that they're not more, to be honest. I'm surprised that TikTok isn't higher. I'm surprised that Reddit's not higher.
Well, when you think about TikTok, has really only been around for a couple of years. They've gone from 0 users to 732 million within a few years, whereas Facebook's been around for, 15 years?
Yeah.
Facebook is for boomers anyway, though. So.
Yeah. Well, there was a trend of use decreasing with increased age across all social networks, but less so of a trend in Facebook, more of a trend in a lot of the other. But so that's just a little bit of background data on social media use.
I mean, it's pretty ubiquitous. How often do you meet someone who doesn't have a Facebook?
Yeah.
I was actually about to say the same thing about a smartphone. I can remember my first smartphone. It was a HTC Aria, and I thought it was the bee's knees. Looking back at it now, it was essentially it wasn't that smart. It was a dumb phone, just with a big touch screen. You couldn't do that much. It was super slow and it had a really small screen. But that must have been about 2010 or 2011. And now, 10 years later, it's rare. I can't even remember the last time that I met somebody that didn't have a smartphone.
Yep.
And also, the power of the smartphones are a bit scary as well. Like, my phone was more powerful than my laptop was about 3 or 4 years ago.
Yeah.
So...
Yeah, it's crazy. Yep. Well, social media use has pretty much doubled since 2012. From the years of 2012 to 2019, pretty much doubled.
Wow. I guess that's a function of a younger population coming into the age where you'd be using social media.
Yep. And just the availability of smartphones. Yeah.
I can't imagine, though, that that's going to be exponential. That can't happen again in the next 10
You'd think
years,
there would be a
can it?
plateau, yeah. But
Surely we'd be nearing that plateau.
you would think so. Certainly the increase has slowed down the last few years. There was a very quick increase from 2012 to 2017, 18, and then it started to slow off a bit. The last few years have been basically 140, 144, 145 minutes on average.
Hey, Sam, did you get the numbers for MySpace users?
No, because I
MySpace?
didn't get data going back to 2003. So sorry.
Nikki and I were talking about this the other night. I remember trying to multitask having a MySpace and a Facebook at the same time.
Whoa.
And then that's how old I am. and then eventually I gave up on the MySpace. It probably still exists. Please don't go searching for it. But it probably still exists somewhere, and it's probably very bad HTML.
Yeah, they tried to pivot into like a music kind of platform, and then that didn't really work very well, I think. But yeah, so that's just a bit of background for social media use. So from what I'd briefly read, just in the things that pop up on social media or other places, I'd seen there's correlations drawn between social media use and depression, anxiety, body image issues, suicidality, self-harm behaviors. I'd also seen recently a couple of things pop up about positive mental health outcomes of social media use.
Interesting.
Yeah, so I looked through a lot of studies for research for this. I would have looked through about 40 studies. I didn't read the whole study for most of them.
Are you in lockdown or something?
Yeah.
Sam? Not much.
Didn't have much else to do.
Better to do.
Yeah. I'd cleaned the house and I'd done all that stuff. So yeah. But really it was very hard to find good quality evidence because, how do you do a randomized controlled trial for social media use?
Yeah.
It's just the nature of psychology. Studying psychology and studying behavioral sciences is there's a lot of observational data, a lot of cross-sectional data, but it's also very hard to draw meaningful conclusions from that kind of data because there's so many confounding factors.
Yeah.
Basically, every study showed weak correlations, not really anything concrete. The best way to approach data like that is to look across multiple sources that are looking at different demographics and all those kind of things, and then you look at the broader trend. You don't look at specific papers for your statistics.
I mean, that's not unique to psychological papers.
No, but in particular, psychological and behavioral science, it's just impossible to control for, and that's just part of the study. And that's not all psychology either. That's just anything that's looking at lifestyle factors over a long period of time. Same with environmental studies, like looking at populations in a particular environment. Sure, it could be for one thing, or it could be from 50 other things that's affecting the population.
Yeah, there's a lot of variables that are impossible to control for.
Yeah. So that's just something to keep in mind. But if you see a very common trend over, period of paper, over a lot of papers over a long period of time, over different demographics, different countries, different journals, etc., then if there's a consistent trend, that's probably a pretty reasonable conclusion to come across.
Yep.
So a brief overview, I did see a few studies found that more time spent on social media is associated with symptoms of depression, anxiety, conduct problems, so behavioral problems, and episodic heavy drinking. There was a study called Increase in Time Spent on Social Media is Associated with Modest Increase in Depression, Conduct Problems, and Episodic Heavy Drinking. It was published in the Journal of Adolescents in 2019, and the title was basically their findings. All three of those showed a trend, but the relationships were fairly modest at best. So there's an example of the kind of results I was trying to wade through.
That doesn't give you much to go on, does it?
No. So another study from the same journal, published in 2017, all these will be in the show notes as well, published in 2017, which was named Adolescent Social Media Use and Mental Health from Adolescent and Patient Perspectives. In this study, they surveyed adolescents and parents, both about their use and then about symptoms. So the increase in use that was reported by both parents and adolescents, the parents reported increased symptoms of inattention, hyperactivity, ADHD, anxiety, and depressive symptoms. What I found quite interesting out of that paper, though, was that with the adolescents reporting increased use, they reported increased fear of missing out, or FOMO, and increased loneliness.
Yeah.
And they also found that anxiety and depressive symptoms were highest in adolescents reporting the highest FOMO, and that was a very strong correlation. So that was an unexpected result.
I have a few problems with a study like that. I mean, I know you've already outlined the issues with studies in psychology and behavioral sciences like this, but if parents are reporting higher levels of anxiety and depressive symptoms and things like that in their children, what are they comparing it to? Because their kids are entering adolescence, right, which is already a time that you expect to find those sorts of behavioral swings. And if they've always had the only way you would know is if you have a month period where they don't have social media and then a month period where they do have social media.
But that probably also, there's issues in that, because I'm guessing there's a component of social media where you would develop a reliance. And so if you get off of social media, then you're going to have withdrawals, if you want to call them that.
Yeah. So I'm not saying that these conclusions are meaningless. I'm just saying
another factor to keep into account.
That's so hard to study, because what are you comparing it to? What's your baseline data? And if your baseline data is from when they were 8, that's not really relevant.
I guess the only way that you could do it is with adolescents from generations prior to social media, but it's really, really difficult to quantify. It's only qualitative data, really.
Yeah.
Looks like from that study, it was just a spot survey. So it was just correlating increased use. So they would do a survey of how much use they had, and then they would do questionnaires for depressive symptoms, FOMO, etc. And then they would correlate the amount of use with the symptoms.
Right.
Okay. Still, I mean, the issues are still there. But
yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Well, interesting that you mentioned that, because there was a study, which I actually don't think I have linked in here, but there was a longitudinal study that followed a cohort of patients over 8 years, from pre-adolescence through adolescence into teenage years. They found no correlation. The nuance here is that they were basically just comparing screen time. So they were correlating whether increased screen time in these particular people correlated with symptoms, but they found no correlation with increased screen time and depressive and anxiety symptoms and self-harm behaviors as well. So, yeah. So over a long period of time, that correlation just with pure screen time is not there. So that's not really the explanation. Yeah.
It's one of those things. Oh, here I am spouting off my opinion again, but I guess it's one of those things where you have to really pay attention to it in yourself and your kids. You know, like if you notice that it's having a detrimental effect on your mental health or on your child's mental health, then that's when maybe don't use it as much. I know it's really hard to recognize those things, but basically what we're getting from these studies is that it's almost impossible to study it quantitatively. And so the best way of dealing with it is be aware that it may have a detrimental impact on your mental health and look out for that.
But again, that's behavioral science and that's psychology. It's all subjective scales. If you're surveying how anxious someone feels, it's how anxious they feel. But anyway, I'll continue on. What drew me into looking into it more when I was doing my first study was I quickly found, when I wasn't actually looking for it, quite a strong correlation between increased social media use and body image issues. So there was a literature review published in 2015 in the Journal of Pediatrics and Child Health, which was called Impact of Social Media on the Health of Children and Young People. And they found there is a pretty modest, but again, reasonable trend showing an association between the increased use of social media and decreased levels of self-esteem and poor body image. That was, again, backed up in a couple of other studies I read. Probably the best I found was one in the Canadian Medical Association Journal, which was published in 2020. It was called Smartphones, Social Media Use and Youth Mental Health. And they basically reviewed as much literature as they could find across multiple domains. So looking at depressive symptoms, anxiety, FOMO, sleep, body image issues, self-harm, and suicidality. It's a very long paper. It's 20-something pages. I'll have a link in the show notes if you do want to read it. And it was quite interesting to read, but really the points I took away from it, they found a very strong correlation with increased time on social media and affecting the sense of self. They found that an increased time on Facebook caused increased feeling of envy or FOMO. Sorry, I've mentioned it a few times. FOMO, fear of missing out, is defined as a pervasive apprehension that others might be having rewarding experiences from which one is absent. Mm-hmm. And they found a very significant correlation there. Really interestingly, they found another paper, which was a randomized study where female participants, the reason that they've done female participants is across every paper, there was variability in findings, but what was really consistent was that females were affected more than males. So there was a randomized study where they had female participants browse either their own Facebook account or a appearance-neutral control site. So still a social media type experience, but no appearance-based content. And they found after just 10 minutes of browsing on their own Facebook account compared to those who browsed in an appearance-neutral control site, they reported a more negative mood.
Wow.
After 10 minutes of browsing. So that's certainly a stronger correlation anyway. They did also report, I didn't love this, but again, it was well enough defined in the paper. But they did show an exposure response relationship between daily electronic media use beyond 2 or more hours per day and insufficient sleep. But, is that from social media use or is that from screen time before bed? They didn't really specify between those, but given that the paper is titled Smartphone Social Media Use and Youth Mental Health, I think they're more talking to smartphone use in that case.
That's a very difficult thing to distinguish long term too, I suppose.
Because
it's pretty rare that I'm on my phone and not on some form of social media.
Yeah, and it's also does it matter?
Yeah.
Because if they're using their phones for social media or anything, that's still, if it's still got a negative impact on their sleep.
Still having the same effect.
It's still worth knowing.
Yeah, so they found screen use beyond 2 or more hours per day disrupted sleep by causing a long time to fall asleep, reduced melatonin secretion, circadian clock delay, reduced amount and delay of REM sleep, and reduced next morning alertness.
Okay.
A lot of findings, all pretty consistent with poor sleep. And have we talked about sleep on here before? I'm sure we have. But there are a whole bunch of negative health effects of having poor sleep.
Yeah, bits and pieces. I don't think we've specifically gone into it. We
Perhaps we should, though.
we touched on sleep
huge
briefly,
topic, but yeah.
I think in the blue light glasses episode.
Yeah, certainly it's something I would definitely find interesting to look into.
I'm really interested in it, to be honest.
Yeah. Maybe
I'd
be my
really
next
like
topic.
to know about dreams, actually, because I keep having this one where I'm falling and I'm falling. What does it mean, Sam? What does it mean?
It means that your bed is actually on a slight angle. So you're getting a slight sensation of falling while you're in bed. So you need to level out your floor.
It's actually what's happening is I'm actually 2 dreams deep and I'm falling off a bridge, and it's just before I've hit the water in the van with all the other guys who are performing Inception.
Oh man, I really want to watch that movie again now. Inception, for those who don't pick up on that, with Leonardo DiCaprio.
Yeah. So I'll just summarize the rest of this paper because it was probably the best paper of the bunch. They looked at high investment as well. So that's people who put a higher value on their content and on what other people perceived of them. And that obviously showed a negative association with basically all mental health outcomes. It tended to exacerbate the positive feelings and it tended to exacerbate the negative feelings more. The more invested you are in it, the more it'll affect you, basically.
That makes sense, yeah.
I mean, it will definitely negatively affect your social life because we've all been there with people who are more focused on getting the perfect Instagram photo than they are about being present at the party that they're at.
Yeah.
Anyway, that's very apocryphal, I realise, but, probably not wrong.
Yeah. Along a similar vein, they looked at receiving feedback specifically. Receiving feedback was found to have an association with subjective well-being, whether positive or negative, or a lack of feedback also pushing into negative. They found that receiving positive feedback on social networking sites increased life satisfaction and happiness. And in another review, they found that students who received extremely negative comments on their Facebook profile were more likely to report disordered eating concerns 4 weeks later.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
That is a worry.
On a couple of positives, though, they looked at social support. So I'll just read directly from there, actually. Online social networks can be a powerful tool for alleviating loneliness. The examples are endless. A student forced to be off school due to a long-term illness or unable to access extracurricular activities because of their physical location or personal restrictions. A shy, self-conscious teenager who feels more comfortable establishing friendships not face-to-face, or a teenager estranged from friends or neighbours during the long summer holidays. So it allows them to participate and communicate with their peers. A couple of other studies I read looking at the positives, again, plagued with the same issues, poor quality data and lots of confounding factors, but there was a few studies that showed some positive value for promoting positive mental health. So adolescents who used social media to seek information about mental health and available support had improvement in subjective measures of their mental health. Obviously, that is conditional on how you use your social media.
And also is not dependent on social media.
No.
Google does the same job.
Yeah.
So,
yeah. But I think they found that adolescents were more willing to search their social media than they were to search Google.
Yeah. That doesn't surprise me. But again, like you said, the number of confounding factors in those studies is just it's make it impossible to draw really solid conclusions. So
really, overall, my summary is there seems to be a weak trend towards increased social media use and depressive and anxiety symptoms. Mm-hmm. Across all domains, it seems to affect females more than males, both in positives and negatives, and across all the areas affected. There does seem to be a more solid link between increased social media use and body image and fear of missing out symptoms. There is also a link between social media use and poorer sleep quality and quantity, although this is quite possibly just due to smartphone use rather than social media specifically. And the intended use of social media seems to play a significant role in the outcomes. So across multiple studies, it was shown that more image-associated use resulted in worse outcomes for depression, anxiety, and self-image, as well as high investment in social media profile, amplifying these effects. More passive use showed much weaker correlations, and screen time alone was not a predictor of increased symptoms. There's also a potential positive effect, although obviously that depends on an individual's use.
Yeah. Okay. I think that's the case for the negative effects as well.
Yep. So that really was a brief summary of a very difficult area of literature.
Sounds like it. Knowing those results as well, you can reach us on Facebook and Instagram at IdeoFacto.
And we only put out positive content.
Yeah.
Well, yeah.
Most of the time. We'll trigger that.
It's definitely not body image related,
yeah,
so that's for sure.
True. No. There's no body image related content. Unless you want it.
To see body image related content, head over to our OnlyFans. /IdeoFactBoys.
Definitely not. Oh dear.
Well, thank you for sifting through that, Sam, because it did sound like it was a bit of a mission to interpret and
I just kept finding more and more papers. I was like, well, this one looks like it might be better. Nope. That's still difficult to draw anything from. Oh, what about this one? Nope. Okay, I'll keep going.
I will actually use Sam's topic as a bit of a segue to my recommendation.
Is it using excessive amounts of social media?
And only looking at body image content?
It's very closely related to that, actually.
Oh, good.
It is the Netflix series Black Mirror. If you haven't already seen Black Mirror, you should definitely go and watch it. I think at the moment there's about 5 seasons possibly, plus there's a Black Mirror movie as well that's interactive that you can play on your phone or on a smart TV. It's called Bandersnatch. But the episodes in the series, and even the early series, basically it's a TV show about the world in the not so distant future where technology has advanced ever so slightly, but not so much that it's unfamiliar to what we have today, which is what makes it incredibly scary. Issues that things like social media will have on us in years to come. And I don't mean in hundreds of years to come. I mean in possibly 10 years to come. Plus other technology as well. But each episode is standalone. Episodes don't flow from one to the other. Actors aren't reused. Characters aren't reused. Each episode is entirely new. So jump in wherever. They're all good. All the episodes. There's probably, I don't know what they'd be now, maybe about 25, 30 different episodes. And in the latest season, the episodes are almost movie length. But if you go back to, say, season 2, some of the episodes are under an hour long. So definitely go and check out Black Mirror.
Nice.
It'll fascinate and frighten you at the same time.
That's a pretty good summary. I'm sorry if I've recommended this before, but I've just finished rereading Adam Savage's semi-autobiographical book called Every Tool's a Hammer. And the title's based on the fact that you can use any tool as a hammer.
That's a fair point. Yeah.
But, a hammer is obviously designed for its purpose, and the sheer pleasure of using a tool that's designed for its purpose outweighs just using
a screwdriver
spanner as a hammer, for example. Yeah, but the point he's making is that there's no excuse not to make things. He also has a series on YouTube. He's got a YouTube channel called tested.com, and he just makes things.
I've seen
and the
that.
best part about the things that he makes is that he shows you the process from beginning to end. And though he is a vastly experienced maker of things with the knowledge and the tools to do any job that you can possibly imagine, he makes an unbelievable number of mistakes. And he shows them all
Awesome.
in
Love
the
that.
videos.
Great.
And admits his mistakes and says, I'm such an idiot because I did this. And it really makes someone like me, who is very novice at DIY things, feel a bit better about the fact that I do things badly sometimes.
Yeah, nice.
So Adam Savage is just a really inspirational guy. I wasn't a huge fan in his Mythbusters days, but since Mythbusters, he really grown on me. So his book is called Every Tool's a Hammer, and his YouTube channel is called tested.com. So check him out.
Nice.
You know what I was interested but not surprised to find out is that Adam Savage and Jamie Hyneman from Mythbusters don't really get along that well as friends.
No, they work really well together, but they don't hang out socially. In their case, the oppositeness of their personalities worked well together. But yeah, they don't really like each other that much.
No.
Fair enough.
What about you, Sam?
My recommendation is also a TV series. It's not a new one, though. It's Silicon Valley. I'm not sure if either of you guys have watched that.
I haven't, no.
Nope.
Oh, come on. Someone's got to watch it. I've been watching it since the first season, and I've been begging someone else to watch it so I could talk about it with someone. It's so funny.
Funny. So it's a comedy.
Yeah. It's a comedy.
Okay.
It's about a group of guys that start a startup company in Silicon Valley. And
Awesome.
It is so funny. It's one of the funniest shows I've watched. It's got such a good cast. Tom Middleditch, Kumail Nanjiani, Zach Woods, TJ Miller. So good. A bit of just your classic slapstick kind of comedy, and then a bit of just the cringe comedy, and it's just great.
Well,
I
that's
love it.
good. I have been looking for a new series to get into.
Oh, please watch Silicon Valley. Great series. Very funny.
Okay. Oh, good.
Have to check it out. That's it for this episode of Ideo Facto. Forward all suggestions, hate mail, evidence and arguments to ideofacto@gmail.com.
And you can find us on the social media platforms that are either evil or helpful, depending on how you interpreted Sam's section, Facebook and Instagram, by searching Ideo Facto.
If you like the show, please rate and review us on iTunes. Links are in the show notes.
How about this science podcast that we're about to do? I might just wait until Sam finishes the mouthful that he's just taken.
All right.
It's fine that you've chosen this time to eat, because it's not like you need to talk at any stage in the next half an hour.
Heck.
All right. Enough horseplay.
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 Join us on an investigative journey.
We'll educate each other on a range of scientific discoveries, concepts, and phenomena.
As well as a dive into the complex world of pseudoscience still got a bit of that cookie in my mouth. As well as a dive into the complex world of pseudoscience to separate the factual from the fabricated.
I'm Matt McCabe.
I'm Levi Bateman.
And I'm Matt McCabe. And I'm Sam Lossarica.
And this is Matt McCabe.